Please welcome for our panel a little bit on the money side of this equation. And please welcome Dave Bogan, founder TuneRegistry and a lecturer here at UCLA Alpert, Jonathan Wallace from Expert Dojo, Josh Remsberg from Capital Music Group, Leah Nanni here from Startup UCLA and Blackstone Launchpad, Jen Hall from TechStars Music, and Michael Frick from the Rattle now in Los Angeles. Thanks, Dave.
All right, welcome. How are you guys doing? See some former students back there. So this panel is really about the music tech ecosystem, the infrastructure, the resources in Los Angeles to provide and support entrepreneurs in any stage of their ventures. And my lovely panelists who decided to join me will each introduce themselves, but they represent organizations that really provide resources, whether it's financial resources, whether it's mentorship, access, advice, guidance, and so forth, really providing support that an entrepreneur needs. So I'm going to start with Leah, and we'll work our way across. Everyone introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Nanni. I work here at Startup UCLA. So we are a free program for all students, alum, faculty, and staff. So if you're any of those things, you might want to listen to this. We provide free consulting at any stage of entrepreneurship. So it could literally be that you had a dream last night about a great business idea and you need some advice. Or it could be that you've had a business for 30 years and you're looking to grow or make some changes. So we have a full team of consultants, and we also run a summer accelerator program, and that one is specifically for companies that are at least at the prototype stage. We also do tons of other programming throughout the year in the summer, and those are usually open to the public.
Hey, I'm Jen Hall. I'm director of the TechStars Music program here in Los Angeles. TechStars Music is a mentorship-driven accelerator that runs for 13 weeks, February to May. We invest in 10 companies a program. We search all over the globe every year for these companies. We take everything from pre-product to fully formed, already invested few $1 million in the bank, and we accelerate them with over those 13 years and help them with follow-on capital afterwards.
My name is Josh Remsberg. I work at Capitol Records. And a year ago at Capital Music Group, we started a accelerator with a company out of Milwaukee by the name of Generator. We took time to mentor 6 companies out of a cohort. We had about 500 applicants, and we narrowed it down to 6. And it went so well, we're running that again this year with mentorship.
My name is Jonathan Wallace. I run investment at Expert Dojo. We're an accelerator based out of Santa Monica. We invest at the pre-seed stage, so very early stage companies, sometimes pre-product, pre-revenue for sure. We invest domestically and internationally. So first half of the year, we do 20 companies in the US. Second half of the year, we do 20 companies internationally. Those companies tend to be in South Korea, India, Israel, and the UK, and a couple in Brazil as well. And it can be any kind of industry.
My name is Michael Frick. I'm with the Rattle Collective, born out of Tobacco Docks in London. We are a creative community for people in music and tech. We work with approximately 200 members in each of the locations. We'll be launching in LA later this year, and we provide mentorship and entrepreneurial guidance to our members who are typically founders of their own independent businesses.
Thank you for the introductions, guys. So I didn't introduce myself, by the way. So I'm Dave Bogan, a serial entrepreneur. I've started 5 music tech companies, sold 3. I teach the music industry entrepreneurship course here at UCLA. I also teach master classes across the country at universities on similar topics. And I've worked with a number of startups who I've guided towards these accelerator programs, have written recommendations to get in, or have, in Josh's case, mentored at their accelerator to founders. So that being said, a lot of my clients have not gotten into some of these accelerators. So I want to talk about vetting and how do you select, because a lot of entrepreneurs want to get into an accelerator, and the competition is really tough. Almost like trying to get into college again. So I want to start with Jen. because TechStars is a huge name in the accelerator space, and TechStars music is a hot topic, being that it's a vertical that's super important to us here in LA. So what is that vetting process like? What does entrepreneurs need to know?
Ooh, long and arduous. Yeah, we go through about 500 companies a year to find our 10. So it's about a 1% acceptance rate. We look all over the globe. Starting in July, we start, I think we went to 15 countries last year trying to find our program. And our program is predominantly, historically has been made up about 60 international and then 40 domestic companies. The thing we look for is founder, right? Like we figure the idea is probably going to be okay. The business is probably going to be wrong. Business plan, terrible. That's all the things that we can work on once you're with us. But we really look at the quality of the founder. And entrepreneurs are special. They're usually completely unemployable in every other realm, which makes them the right person for the job to do their business. And it really comes down to the quality of the person and that they're the only ones in the world that they feel that they can actually get that job done, because then they're going to have the drive to do it.
What about you, Jonathan? You guys are investing in startups around the world simultaneously with startups here in the US. How do you vet?
So we actually have an open application that anybody can apply for. We have people who filter through that. So from that application, we get several thousand applicants. From that, we probably have a team of a team of 3 investor people. We meet with probably 500 to 1,000 companies, and that's where we find the 40 companies we do every year. So we see a lot of different companies. Just even through screening, we see a lot of stuff. And I would echo what you were saying, is just the founders really is what we look for, especially since we are so early. A lot of the time, there's no numbers to go off of. A lot of the VCs like, what due diligence do you guys go off of? We don't have anything to go off of. There's no numbers. There's nothing really. Almost everyone we've invested in has been pre-revenue. Maybe they have some users, some traction, but it's really just, is this founder awesome? Are they going to be a rock star in this space? Are they going to make this happen whether I'm in it or not? And that's the people we want to be involved with. And you just have to have the person who's going to make this happen, and they have that X factor with them, really. It's hard to describe what exactly it is that you find, but you know when you see it.
Yep.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I can actually add to that. So our pool is much smaller because you have to be a UCLA student or alum within 5 years of your graduation date to even qualify. So we're not getting thousands of applications. We're getting about 70, and we accept 10. And I'll definitely echo what you guys are saying. For sure, we're looking at kind of who's behind it. But I think to give you something more specific, one of the things we look for is the founder or the founding team, are they people that just see problems, or are they people that see problems as opportunities for creative solutions? And we can usually tell that just based off of their history and what they've done so far and what challenges they've run into, because of course, like, there's always going to be a million barriers. And the question is, are they the type of person that says, oh, well, someone told me no, or something in the world is telling me no, therefore I can't? Or are they saying, oh, well, that's just something I have to figure my way around? So that's a huge part of it. And also, I'd say we're looking at how teams are going to interact together, because our accelerator, I'm sure like yours as well, is definitely a community. So you might have somebody that has a great idea and has the right skill set, but it's also a personality fit oftentimes, which for somebody who's applying, they can never really know if they're going to fit into that group. But it is about demonstrating that you're someone who wants to be part of a community.
Just one thing to add as far as capital is concerned, our program differs in a few ways. One, we're very much in our infancy compared to everybody else that's up here. And unlike Expert Dojo or TechStars and others, capital isn't currently investing in these companies. So we're literally just opening up our doors and giving access for a much shorter program. So the program is 13 weeks. Yeah. 13 weeks. So we're 7 weeks. We're half that. So we're also handcuffed by, ultimately, because we're being tasked with like experimenting as a record label, we're handcuffed in the sense of looking at companies that are going to impact our core business first. And then from there, we look at the fit as far as the founders are concerned.
Thank you. Michael, actually, let's talk a little bit about the Rattle and how do creators come into that community, and what is that relationship to the Rattle?
Well, with the Rattle, the community is the important part. We want people to be founder minded, but you also need to be able to bring something to the community. We're not a label. We're not looking to sign people or qualify their success. We want to help them get to those milestones that they're looking to get to. But we also want them to be able to vibe and work with the other people that are part of the community. We're about 60% music makers and about 40%. So they actually can, experiment with one another. And, what we've seen in London so far is, with regard to what we provide, some community programming, thought leadership conversations. We have a pool of mentors that come through. And our members kind of drive what interests and, things that they want to learn in terms of what we're bringing in, for them to kind of think about where they're going with their careers. If we don't say to our artists who are aspiring musicians, no, you don't want a major label deal. It's a matter of, what do you need something like that for, and when is that good for your career? Similarly with the tech makers as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful space in London, by the way.
That's amazing.
It's so nice.
So let's talk a little bit about how Los Angeles as a community and an investment space measures up, right? And so we have Silicon Valley, and then we have Silicon Beach. So with Silicon Beach being kind of the new, it's been several years, but definitely growing as a space where people set up shop from a headquarters standpoint. And obviously there's been some large transactions from an investment standpoint down here. But how does LA measure up to Silicon Valley, and where do you see that relationship from the perspective of a founder and the growth of their company? I'm gonna start with you, Jen.
LA's really become a player, I think, in the investment world. We see a lot of activity here, especially for pre-seed and seed stage. When companies want to start going for something a little bit more than about 5 million, when they want to start looking at a Series A, then they usually have to travel up to the valley, traditional valley, I guess we could call it. But I think people are realizing that Los Angeles is a hub for really great music tech ideas, especially with the amount of capital that we've been putting into the space. I mean, especially with, capital doing what they're doing. I mean, TechStars is TechStars Music. We have our membership, so it's Sony, Warner, Concord, Record Choco and Avex out of Japan, Silver Artist Management, Q Prime, Bill Silva Entertainment, Royalty Exchange. They fund our program to help innovation within all those companies. So the fact that they're focusing on the program here in Los Angeles, and we infuse $120,000 into each of our companies each year. Right there, that bit of seed stage investment is just really making a difference. And I think the success of TechStars Music over the past couple of years has been able to show how viable this investment community is within Los Angeles.
Yeah, I can add to that too, I guess. So over the last, I've been here for about 5 years now, working with the VC scene. And when we first started here, there was really only like 3 or 4 funds that you could talk to, and then if they all said no, then you had to move because there was no one else to talk to. And now there's dozens of new funds. There's probably over 50 funds that are legitimate players in the market who most of them do seed and Series A at the most. And then there still is like only 7 or 8 big funds that can do beyond that. And then outside of them, you need to go to Silicon Valley. But it's really become a well-developed market, and it has a very strong seed and Series A scene, I would say. And it's even more than that, it's shifting down here a lot more, so that a lot of the big players up in Silicon Valley are actually moving down here, opening up offices down here, sending partners down here full time because they see the potential in what's happening here. And a lot of people want to get involved in it at the very early stage. So you're seeing it transition everywhere, and a lot of the Silicon Valley bubble is kind of burst that it's going everywhere now too. They're not just looking in San Francisco, they're looking in LA, they're looking in New York, they're going to Austin, Texas, or Seattle, or and they're finding it everywhere. So it's really becoming a much smaller world as the tech scene's growing too.
I think there's also.
I have a question to that. If it's
okay. Absolutely.
If being that we're in Hollywood, is there an IP play to some of the things that you're seeing in terms of the pitches, or is it based on the product or the platform and more the technology?
I'd say most, it depends. Yeah. Most investors, if you have a product, it's good to have IP, obviously. It helps the product, but not everything is going to be able to have that. So it really just depends on what the product is and what their strategy is and what the go-to-market is and everything too.
Yeah, we traditionally only invest in companies that have proprietary IP.
I want to shift to talk about musicpreneurs. Specifically, artists are starting to look at launching, advising, or investing in startups. What are you seeing in the industry? How are artists leveraging these opportunities? I want to start with you, Josh, because we had a good conversation, our kind of pre-panel discussion around this.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about this is, thank you. For a long time, record labels weren't really keen to embrace tech, and so what you started to see was musicians find ways to embrace tech, to cut through the noise and to kind of raise their hands and cut through, right? Gain fan bases in new, unique ways. One example I always like to use is a musician that used to be signed to a major record label, but by the name of Ryan Leslie. Ryan Leslie has a Harvard MBA, really smart young man, and he's an incredible talent. He actually created and invested in a company called Superphone, it deals with SMS and fan messaging. But he's done a lot of that, and I think you're seeing artists play in that space in order to gain more attention and traction.
Jen, I brought this up to you in our pre-panel discussion. You guys have a unique model where you have artists in residence and in a way connecting tech founders who may have no music background with artists. And I think it's really great to create this relationship early on in their startups to build respect. Why is that important for TechStars Music? Why did you guys put that together, and how is it working?
Well, artists are entrepreneurs inherently in what they're doing. Any musician is. I managed bands for a really long time prior to going into tech, and managing a band is just the same as dealing with entrepreneurs in the tech space. But I think when you are used to, when you're trying to get your company funded, when you're trying to build your product, you're dealing with executives, tech people, and especially in the music space, where there's been so much friction over the years, is the actual content, whether it's the track or is expendable, right? It's considered a loss leader. Just give me a bunch of tracks so that my app can do X, right? So that's been a point of contention over the years, because that's someone's art, right? That's someone's lifeblood. They've worked their entire life to create that. So we felt it was really important to bring artists in to speak to our entrepreneurs so they can understand the artist mind and understand how that product works within the artist. And to have an artist advocate is great as well. And so then they understand when they're going into certain discussions and they might be promised X, and then at the end they hear, oh, well, the artist didn't approve it. They understand why. And maybe they can tailor their product to be something that's a little more artist friendly, that might give it a better chance to get off the ground. And artists are incredibly tech savvy, incredibly forward thinking, and they can really take an idea that an entrepreneur has and takes it to the next level. So that's kind of the added benefits on top of just getting a bit more business knowledge.
I think this goes back to Jen's point about just the importance of the founders, because as a record label, looking at our core business, our traditional business, an artist is much like a founder, right? They have to be creative. They have to have something unique and special about them that's going to make them stand out in the space. And what's really important about these music tech these music tech accelerators is the fact that we're finding ways to bridge the gap between music and tech, and utilizing the artists that want to play in the space.
Leah, I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of education and educating early entrepreneurs, because you guys are in a unique space where you are a traditional accelerator, but you also have this obvious relationship with the university and that funnel of university students, but also recent grads. So how important is education to your overall programming?
It's a huge part of what we do. I think whenever I come to events like this, I think there's a lot that happens before you're ready for an accelerator, right? Before you're ready for TechStars. And it really begins with, I think, confidence and competence in the world of entrepreneurship, period. So a lot of our programming centers around that, about preparing people. for what is it actually like to be an entrepreneur and what skill sets are required, and the mindset. And as we were talking about earlier, kind of like anything, I mean, how many kids do you hear say that they want to become doctors and then they don't, right? Like there's always going to be a lot of people who think that they want to do something, and then the more they learn about it, the more they realize that's not really the right pathway for them. So I think that we actually are kind of doing a service to the startup ecosystem by helping to kind of not exactly vet people, but prepare them and help them decide whether or not it's the right route. So education is absolutely infused into everything that we're doing all the time. And that's also true for our accelerator as well. I think everyone would agree that no matter what stage you're at, you should always be open to learning. And I think that also kind of ties into the discussion about a founder and their personality and mentality. For us, it's so important to see that they care about someone's opinion other than their own, which is same for hearing from artists or from customers and users. That's like a critical component for any type of business, that if you cannot take feedback from someone outside of your team who is a stakeholder in what you're offering, then you're probably going to fail.
I want to add that to the first question on what we look for in terms of founders. Coachability, 100%. If the sooner you're able to get to your knees and ask for mercy, going, I don't know how to do this, the more we're able to help. And that's not to break you down as seen as a flaw. It's really to give us the opportunity to do the maximum amount of good for you. And if you come in with a lot of hubris and a lot of ego, and that, you're doesn't stink, then we can't help you. So if we ask you, is everything okay? How's your business? And you're like, oh, it's great. And the person next to you goes, oh my God, my hair's on fire. We're going to go put that fire out. And we're going to spend our time putting that fire out. But, you might be in complete shambles and we're never going to know. So that's important. It's a really important part of when we're vetting our founders.
One other thing about the education element for us, we are serving students and alum from every single area of study. So to date, I believe we've served over 97 degree programs, which is really awesome. And I think is a testament to the fact that entrepreneurship has less to do with traditional education in terms of what degree you have, and much more to do with finding an area of interest where there are problems that you really want to solve. And being at an institution like UCLA or just being in a place like Los Angeles where there are tons of people, we are in a very densely populated area that's also incredibly diverse in terms of skill set, background, perspective, whatever it is. It's a wonderful place to build a team, because that's also something that we look for, especially when we're working with teams, is we want to see that there's complementary skill sets, and I'm sure you guys look for that as well.
Yeah, I was going to echo off what you were saying too. With a program like that, you can really teach somebody what they should actually be doing, because a lot of people think they want to be founders because they've seen The Social Network and they want to be Mark Zuckerberg, and they don't really understand how difficult it is in everyday life and just by financial implications of it. I've seen people lose everything in a company. It's not an easy life. To very.
I hope Silicon Valley is part of your curriculum.
Like I remember like a year and a half ago, we had a company come to us. It's like, I have 16 cents left in my bank account. I have a week to make this happen. If I don't get another investor to come in, the company's probably going under. And he sent us a bank account statement at the end of the week because he had found an angel come in. He had $100,000 and 16 cents left in his account. And I don't think a lot of people are mentally prepared enough to be able to handle, I have no money in my account. I have to pay my kids' lunch bills tomorrow. It's a lot of pressure to be under constantly. It's never as glamorous as it looks, and it doesn't really get that way even if you have a lot of money in the bank, because it's not yours at the end of the day, it's the company's. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very stressful job, and a lot of people, you have to be really mentally prepared for that.
No, I think that's a great point. Definitely been there as a founder. You have to balance that amount of stress, and you have to be able to deal with it and be able to talk and have a supportive team. Actually, I have an interesting question, because I've gotten this question from individuals that have been in their career for a long time. So I have clients who are who've been in their career for decades, and they've decided to branch out and start startups. And then I have clients who are fresh out of college who are starting startups. So clients in different levels. Where do you think that age or previous career history contributes to the ability to potentially do well in an accelerator program?
No, I mean, I don't think, I think it depends on, again, it depends on the founder. You can have someone right out of college that has the idea and is so hungry and is going to do anything that they want to do. Or you have someone who has already been incredibly successful. Like our first program, we had a company called Weave, and the CTO of Weave was Lars Rasmussen. And Lars is known for creating a little thing called Google Maps, right? And so while he has had this huge success, he wants another one of those, right? So that is equivalent in drive to the college student. Yes, different financial situations, but I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Almost everything. We have college kids. Like I met a couple kids from UCLA here who they have a business they've been running out of here just to get their tuition money through. They make $5K a month in this business. It's enough for them. It's not going to. I mean, it didn't look like it was going to scale beyond what they're in school, but they were able to find a way to get what they need at that moment. And they have the entrepreneurial mindset. And even if it's not the right business right now, that's somebody I would want to say, hey, next time you have a business idea, come to me, and I'd love to be able to look at it right away. Because they have the mentality of how I'm going to make this work. I have a problem, I'm going to solve it no matter what. And you see that mindset in every kind of person like that. And it's not like an age demographic you really see.
Well, wait, Day, let me just flip it on you for a second. When did you start your first music tech startup?
When I started my first music tech startup or my first company?
Let's start music tech first.
Music tech?
Yeah.
Let's see, I was 27.
Right. So you saw an opportunity and then you went and learned, right? So you just had that it didn't matter what age you were. That's right. So,
but my first company was at UCLA.
Right.
And the students he's talking about are my students, by the way. But I tell this story in my class about how I paid part of my tuition through starting my business at UCLA. But it was my first music tech company was at 27, and then I've started several since. But I think one thing I do want to talk about, though, because we talked, about I think the way to prepare or the types of entrepreneurs that might do well in an accelerator program. But at the top of the conversation, I asked you guys about how you vet for your company, and you've all talked about dozens or hundreds of companies coming to you. So in this age where 90% of startups fail, how do you manage risk in terms of your decision making as far as who gets in and who doesn't? Are we looking for, is it throw a salad against the wall and see what sticks mentality? Or is it, we hope that all 10 of them are going to all be unicorns, or do we have a reality that, one might be, and then that'll make up for the rest of the investments?
Well, because at Capital, we have the least amount of risk, right? We're just investing time. So for us, again, the way we're betting is we're looking at companies that could potentially impact our core business first and foremost. Because if something does stick, then we're close to it early on that we can run with it and impact core business. So it's a little bit of a loaded question for me because our risk is minimized compared to the other people up here.
Yeah, I mean, that's just math.
Yeah.
It just comes down to math. It comes down to probability. It comes down to, the majority are going to fail. I mean, that's why at least TechStars, that's why, we're a venture, it's called venture investing for a reason. This isn't the put your money away and get a nice return when you want to retire. It's to find that unicorn. And usually you got to get a portfolio of around 60 to have a good shot at getting 1 or 2. With a decent return?
Yeah, I'd say it's the exact same thing. Right now we've been around for about 18 months. My fund, so we haven't had any companies die as of yet, but we're under no illusion that's not coming. Even that we know there's some companies have already taken off, and some companies have already started to fizzle out. And it's just you've seen the market on some of them, and obviously look for like acquisitions and things like that at a smaller level. But as far as like a big unicorn, there's not any way to get through the probability of it, because it's just you can put a lot of things out there, but there's no promise it's going to happen with just any number you do. It's math, really.
But I guess, Jen, to your point earlier, or I guess that was a couple weeks ago now, there was a company that went through your program, and I won't say who, but they pivoted, and this is your point about founders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, it comes back to, in terms of us and how we invest, is looking at the founder. So we had one company come in, our first program, that they took a couple million in capital. They did their best, and it was, writing was on the wall. They had, back to your point, they had 1 month worth of operating capital left. They got a quick bridge and turned it around, completely pivoted, have a whole new product, and it will be our, our best portfolio company to date once that all closes. But in terms of betting and then, the LA ecosystem, I think it's something that we should point out that within our first 2017 program and a 2018 program, we've had 13 companies go on and do over $50 million worth of follow-on capital. And I think that has a lot to say with growing LA ecosystem and the investment that's coming here. And it's making meaningful differences in these companies.
So, a part of this discussion is really about incubation and community and space. And I want to throw it back to you, Michael, because you guys specifically, create these spaces for not just entrepreneurs, but creators. So can you talk a little bit about, how does the space, provide or uplift creators, and like, how does it work? Because it's different than an accelerator.
Our founders in the UK have a pretty deep background when it comes to innovation. One worked at Abbey Road Red Incubator program. The other one Chris Howard has a PhD in computational physics and is a failed musician by his own story. But they're really good at guiding our members in terms of asking those difficult questions. I think that Ben was speaking to in terms of when you need to ask for help. They really, take the time to grill our members, whether they be, a musician or, one of the many members who are developing different tech platforms. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the drive and the ability for those founders to really know their path and know that if they need to shift, it may be time, or they may find another member who has a similar concept or maybe a solution for a problem that they didn't know that could be solved from our inside our community. And I've kind of lost track of the question at that point.
I also think, just from a very basic earlier perspective, it's about showing that there's evidence that the problem that you think exists actually exists, and that the solution that you've developed is desired by enough people.
Yes. You take my class, you'll know how to do that. Market quantification. Now I just lost the chain of my thought. Yeah. Oh, actually, I remember now. So I have I do a mentorship at South by Southwest. I've done it for the last 4 years. And at South by Southwest, I sit down, I'm doing these one-on-one kind of quick dating with an entrepreneur, and I provide 15 minutes of advice, which sometimes turns into long-term consulting with the client. And I've met over the years, not only at South by Southwest, but other conferences that I attend, a ton of startups that are music tech companies, but they specifically use content. And they are challenged with raising money or getting into accelerators. So for the record, can we talk about startups that basically exist to use content and why they struggle so much to raise money and to get into accelerators? So I'll throw this at you, Jen, first.
Yeah, rights holders. I mean, considering that.
And then we'll throw it to Josh for being a rights holder. Yeah.
Considering that 70% of your revenue goes out the window before you even get off the ground is painful. But yeah, I mean, the rights holders, that's why, Warner Music and Sony and Coord and Avex are all part of our program, is because they want to innovate. They want to figure out a way to distribute their content in a meaningful way. And they realize getting to a listener is much harder now because of all the noise. So this is an avenue that might be able to help their core business models.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's, without getting into details on how many rights holders there are on a given composition, one of the things that UMG, that Universal Capital's parent company, has done is create a sandbox license of 80,000 tracks to give to creators and developers to experiment and play. So that's kind of the ways we are embracing and trying to embrace tech. But traditionally, because of how many rights holders are on any given composition, it's been really difficult because people want to get paid. Somebody said it earlier. This is somebody's work of art. It's hard work. It's their life's work, and they want to see revenue from that.
But what about we're going to give them exposure?
Exposure dollars.
The days of exposure. It's still important, but again, there's a lot of people that need to be paid.
But what about we're going to sell our data back to the label?
Yeah, that's not going to happen anymore, unfortunately. I think we've seen
the company that actually can quantify the data and turning into actual meaningful steps that the label can use. That's a company that I'd be interested in.
Oh, me too.
But what about we're going to create our own coin and your artists get paid directly?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
These are all things I've heard, by the way. So we have I think about 10 more minutes left. So I want to actually open it up to questions if there are any. Any entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs or anyone.
Margaret, turn this on. And I will now show how bad I am at throwing, and I will walk over the.
TechStars said
Oh, you really? Wow. I'm glad you didn't hit her, but okay. Hi, my name's William. LA born and raised. Wait. Hi. I am a DJ. I do throw production events. In the last panel, the whole underground. I'm part of that scene. And my biggest question for you guys is, you specifically, before you got involved with your positions, how important was education to you going into where you're at now? Like, I know we're in a day and age where education does make a difference, and being open to education is something you have to have. But where were you at before you got to this level with your education, and how did it help you get to where you're at now?
I'll start. This is embarrassing, but I went to the University of Michigan. I majored in general studies, which means nothing. But look, it's a great university, and it got me a foot in the door. But UMG and other major companies have a college program. So I quickly became a college rep at the University of Michigan, and I just immersed myself in music and music management and being a club promoter. And that helped me in my trajectory, working my way up to Capitol Records and over there to label side.
I'm a graduate of the UCLA School of Film, Theater, and Television. Thank you very much. And I wish I could say it. I guess, hey, it helped get me here in terms of how I learned to think. Having an open mind, being aware of new opportunities. Does it directly correlate with the fact that I work now in venture capital and tech? Nope. But being able to, just expand the way I think and realize that I can go into a vertical that I might necessarily have a degree in and do just fine. I guess it helped close that confidence gap for me.
So I would say I've had kind of two educational experiences that have been transformative. One was undergrad, which I just did because it's what you're supposed to do. And I actually, a year after graduating, was 22 and I wanted to retire. So I knew something was very wrong. And that's what propelled me into my first business. So that was obviously important, but indirectly so, and couldn't have been predicted. And then many years later, I went and got my master's at USC. I got 2 masters actually. And 100% financially is not paid off. So, and I think that that's true, like across the board right now, that's happening in education, aside from a few select programs. However, it absolutely gave me, one, a language to be able to participate in this world. I had run my own business for 6 years prior to grad school, and I still had no idea. If I would have come to this event, I wouldn't know what anybody was talking about. So there was that. And then also just providing access to a world of people that were doing things that I didn't know about. And universities are a place where there's so much in terms of free resources but you have to know about it in order to take advantage of it. So whether that's money or programming or alumni support, there are so many things that people don't realize you can get out of going to college, but it's really about your mindset of like, why are you there in the first place?
I studied broadcast communications at a small school in Maryland called Salisbury, and ended up as a set PA on Jim Cameron's True Lies, and followed the production out here to LA, and quickly evaluated in the craft-based industry. Visual effects was a good place to go, so I thought I was going to be a compositor, and started writing music reviews at the same time, and then jumped after Titanic into the pre-dot bomb world to make flash-based music videos, which didn't happen, but found myself with a music licensing company and signed all of the artists that I loved to, sync representation deals. From there, I started a music production company that was basically music services with composers for film and TV and ads. I didn't realize it was an incubator until after I sold it, but some of our composers became Foster the People, Tantrums, Capital Cities, and McCartan Kids. So then when I heard about what the Rattle were doing, I looked at that and said, well, that was similar to what I had done before, except I wasn't running a service-based business. So if we can do that better and build that community of those artists, that's where I want to be.
Mine's a little different than most people's here. When I was 17, I graduated high school and I was trying to figure out how I was going to pay for college because I didn't have a way to do it. So I started the company, moved down to LA to go to school down here. Eventually that company started doing pretty well. I started meeting, most of my clients were entrepreneurs. It was a real estate based company. I met a few VCs that way, worked with that for about 18 months, met one of the partners I know now. He helped me get into one of the VC firms he was working with. I got hired on in a VC firm and I never actually finished school. So that company I was with ended up getting absorbed into that VC's portfolio by another company. And then he hired me on and I've been working with that fund since then. So
I guess the real answer to the question is, do you pay tuition currently? No. Oh, okay, well, it is important because we're at UCLA. But I think what's really interesting about music and tech, and probably even more broadly, the arts in general, is it's not where you go, or it's like what you do when you have the opportunity to do, period, right?
So I teach a masterclass version of my full music industry entrepreneurship course. So it's kind of a 4-hour sample. And I started with an overview of Daniel Ek, Scooter Braun, Troy Carter, Jimmy Iovine, none of which have a college degree. And collectively, they're worth billions of dollars in music tech. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a traditional education. It also doesn't mean that your education needs to be specifically in music tech, because guess what? There's only one university that has a class that deals with music tech startups, and I teach it. So I'm not surprised when I meet founders who don't have a music tech startup education, because there's only one class, and that's mine. So to Jen's point, it's really about learning to learn, learning to absorb, being open-minded, being coachable, like all those things. That's so much better than coming to me with a master's degree. As a matter of fact, most of my clients have degrees, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful in entrepreneurship. Any other questions?
Hold on.
A bunch of them. So this time I'm going to try to keep the responses short because we spent 5 minutes on ours.
And say who you are, as he did beautifully.
Hello. Hi, my name is Chase Lewis. I'm a recent graduate from Pepperdine University. I'm a graphic designer, photographer, and social media manager. And my question is, I'm currently working on creating the second generation of music streaming services. So my question is to you, when someone comes to you and has an idea and says, this is what I want to work on, what are those next steps that you're looking from them to show that, they're serious or ready to take those next steps and ready to work?
I think I can field this question because I'm probably the one that works with people at that stage the most. One of the first things that I'm always going to talk to you about is customer discovery, which is a process of going out into the actual world and hearing from the people that you're trying to help. Whoever you think experiences the problem that you're trying to solve, finding out from their perspective what that problem actually is and what language they use to describe it. And for many people, that's the stopping point.
We'll take this question here.
Okay, so it's Jimmy from China Investment Promotion Agency. Actually, the the culture and the creative industry in China is still emerging, and especially like at the music industry is not that well organized right now. So I'm thinking if any advice for China industry, if you want to also build the ecosystem for the music industry or even the entire entertainment industry. What would be the best steps for us to begin? Because we just began to we're organized for licensing market, but actually the education system is education resource is very tight, and also some other business is still very slow right now, but the consumer market is very huge. So what could be the contribution for China market to connect with the LA ecosystem?
Well, I'll address this. So, I mean, I can't speak to China as a whole, right? I'm not an expert on China, but I do have students who are from China. And I think you do a really great job of exporting talent into the United States to learn about business and building ventures. But how do you bring them back to execute on what they've learned? Because my students who graduated from my entrepreneurship class went to grad programs at Columbia and UCLA and other schools, and they intend to work for American companies. So I think an incentive, maybe your VC can provide some early incentive to students you identify who's going to go to the US and get a MBA or study economics in undergrad, and then can actually bring that back to use it. But that would be my perspective. I mean, I have some grad students at USC Marshall where I do a master class, and again, even got their undergrad in China and came to Los Angeles for their MBA or their master's in business analytics, and then apply it here. So I think there's some incentive that needs to happen. The other discussion is too high up in terms of the ability to even do certain things. I have customers who can't even license music in China. So we have a worldwide license excluding China. So, and Josh can speak to this, from a label standpoint, like there's reasons why the labels will not, license certain territories. But that's one territory that we constantly have to struggle with. So I think there's a combination, something that you can't address, which is the global economics of and the global music licensing issue, which you can't really address as an individual VC or company. But what you can address is to incentivize emerging entrepreneurs or students that you guys can identify locally to make sure they come back. And maybe that means tuition reimbursement or something, but just from having written a number of recommendations for my students who come from China and then learn here and continue to operate here, I think that would be an incentive. We have time for one more question. We can do a follow-up outside.
My name's Cameron. I just had a question about, we talked earlier today in the day, another one of the panels addressed the idea of lower income issues for artists and housing being a problem for starting artists and for starting entrepreneurs in the creative field. I wanted to just ask generally what you guys think about startups in the music space specifically for low-income housing for artists, and what kind of opportunities do the startups that you guys have provide for founders who offer that kind of resource to artists?
So just specifically as it relates to housing, we haven't addressed that yet, but one of the things that we're doing at Capital this year with Generator, they ran a program called Backline in Milwaukee, which they gave a handful of artists 20 grand in grant money. And along that process, they taught those artists how to deal with mental health issues. They taught those artists how to be a business and to grow their business. And they did that through mentorship from people at record labels and agencies and everything else. That went so well that we actually partnered with them to run that program with Motown Records in Detroit this year, where again, we're giving 4 artists 20 grand in grant money. So that's one way that we're trying to give back and address that, but not specifically as it relates to housing.
Yeah, I think that's a really specific question in regards to housing. I know Michael can speak to communities in general. There is a company or an organization in San Francisco, I think it's called Music House or Music Town. It's like a hotel, but they do provide some sort of incubation for creators, and it's housing included. But I would say what I'm seeing the most in terms of the ecosystem is there's more nonprofit oriented incubators. We were just talking about this earlier, so the next panel will probably get to this and asked DeMarco specifically because he works with Music Forward and they do a lot with underrepresented youth. And there's a program in Compton called The Nest, which is a recording studio that's nonprofit, and they select students in Compton to be able to come and learn to engineer and work on music. And they bring in speakers and all this stuff. So there's things like that are kind of up all over, but housing and specifically, I'm not sure.
I think also it's about providing, if you are providing funding, not having limitations on what that funding can be spent on. So for Startup UCLA, for example, our accelerator, it's a 10-week program and we don't have a lot of money to give, but everybody gets $5,000 and they can spend it however they want and there are no questions asked.
Yeah, TechStars too. So we offer $120,000 and we just, however you want to use it is fine. You just have to be here in Los Angeles.
And on our end, we are looking at spaces that may have some sort of youth hostel type of setup. I imagine that motor lodges and old motels could be cool places that you could do that in as well.
So, all right, thank you guys for your time.
Round of applause, please, for this lovely panel. Thank you.